You are not imagining it. Some people do not seek connection, truth, or growth. They seek control. They provoke, distort, drain, and smile while doing it. And the most disturbing part is this. The more you try to be good, patient, or understanding with them, the more power you hand over. This is where most people lose without ever realizing they are in a game. Today, we are not talking about morality in the comforting sense, but about lucidity, about seeing clearly what others refuse to name. Machiavelli understood something brutal yet liberating. Toxic people thrive on your confusion, not your weakness. In this video, you will learn how to stop reacting, stop bleeding energy, and quietly reverse the dynamic. If this resonates, comment the phrase, "clarity over chaos." Stay until the end, because the final truth you will hear is one few dare to accept. Like the video, subscribe, and listen closely. This may change how you see people forever. Long before modern psychology gave names to manipulation, Machiavelli observed something unsettling about human nature. Power rarely belongs to the most moral, but to the most lucid. In Renaissance courts, survival depended on reading intentions beneath words, smiles, and virtues displayed in public. Thinkers like Machiavelli, but also the Stoics, understood that cruelty often hides behind politeness, and that naivete is not innocence but blindness. Over time, this knowledge became uncomfortable, even taboo, because it clashes with the modern fantasy that everyone plays fair. Our era, obsessed with positivity and appearances, has buried this wisdom under guilt and denial. Yet the rise of toxic dynamics, emotional manipulation, and psychological games is no accident. It is the wound of a world that teaches people to be agreeable, but not discerning. What was once survival wisdom has become forbidden truth, and that is precisely why it matters now. To beat toxic people at their own game, you must first accept a truth that unsettles the ego. You are not dealing with misunderstandings, but with strategies. Toxic individuals do not operate randomly. They test, probe, and observe. Every reaction you give them is data. Every explanation is a door. Every emotional outburst is a confirmation that they still have access to you. This is why trying to reason with them feels exhausting and pointless. You are playing chess while they are playing a different game altogether, one where the objective is not truth, but leverage. Machiavelli understood that the greatest mistake is to assume others share your intentions. When you project your values onto someone who does not have them, you become predictable, and predictability is oxygen for manipulation. The first mechanism toxic people rely on is reaction harvesting. They provoke not to resolve conflict, but to extract an emotional response. Anger, guilt, fear, justification, even excessive kindness all serve the same purpose. They confirm that you are hooked. The moment you feel the urge to defend yourself, to correct their narrative, or to prove your goodness, you have already entered their terrain. This is not because you are weak, but because you are human. Your nervous system is wired to seek coherence and fairness. Toxic people exploit this wiring mercilessly. They create ambiguity, half-truths, and insinuations, knowing your mind will rush to fill the gaps. Silence disturbs you more than it disturbs them, and they know it. This is why Machiavellian strategy begins not with confrontation, but with detachment. Not emotional coldness for its own sake, but strategic restraint. You must learn to separate what is said from what is intended. Toxic people often use moral language, victimhood, or false vulnerability to disguise their moves. They will accuse you of being selfish when you set boundaries, cruel when you withdraw attention, or arrogant when you stop explaining yourself. These accusations are not reflections of reality. They are tools designed to pull you back into engagement. The trap is subtle. If you defend yourself, you validate their frame. If you argue, you accept their rules. If you over-justify, you signal insecurity. Machiavelli would tell you that the safest position is the one that cannot be easily read or exploited. Another key dynamic is asymmetry of investment. Toxic people often invest very little emotionally but extract a lot from others. They provoke storms while remaining dry. You, on the other hand, may invest empathy, patience, time, and emotional labor, believing that consistency will eventually lead to understanding. This belief is noble but dangerous. In strategic terms, you are overexposed. The more you invest, the more leverage they gain. Machiavelli warned that generosity without discernment becomes self-destruction. The solution is not cruelty, but calibration. You must learn to match investment, not exceed it. Give clarity, not emotion. Give structure, not access. Give consequences, not speeches. Toxic individuals also rely heavily on narrative control. They are often skilled storytellers, not because they love truth, but because they understand perception. They will rewrite events, shift blame, and subtly reposition themselves as the misunderstood party. If you challenge them directly, they escalate confusion. If you stay silent, they accuse you of indifference. This double bind is intentional. It forces you into a lose-lose situation unless you step outside the frame entirely. Machiavelli's insight here is ruthless but precise. Do not fight narratives emotionally. Undermine them structurally. This means you stop arguing about intentions and focus on patterns. You do not say, "You hurt me," but "This behavior is not acceptable." You do not debate motives, you set limits. Toxic people hate limits because limits reduce their room to maneuver. One of the most underestimated weapons against toxicity is controlled unpredictability. Toxic people thrive on knowing how you will respond. They count on your consistency, your morality, your desire for harmony. When you break this pattern calmly, without drama, you disrupt their internal map. This does not mean becoming erratic or cruel. It means refusing to follow scripts. Sometimes you respond briefly, sometimes you delay, sometimes you do not respond at all. Not to punish, but to reclaim autonomy. Machiavelli understood that power is not about domination, but about denying others the ability to dominate you. When your reactions are no longer automatic, you become difficult to manipulate. It is also crucial to understand that toxic people often mirror strength while feeding on weakness. They may appear confident, assertive, even charismatic, but beneath that surface lies a fragile need for control. This is why they provoke reactions instead of engaging in honest dialogue. True strength does not need constant confirmation. The moment you stop providing emotional supply, the dynamic shifts. They may escalate, becoming more aggressive or more victimized. This escalation is not a sign that you are wrong. It is a sign that the old tools are no longer working. Machiavelli would tell you to expect resistance when you change the rules. Transformation always reveals who benefited from your previous state. There is a painful question many people avoid. Why do toxic individuals target you specifically? The uncomfortable answer is that they sense something valuable: your empathy, your reliability, your conscience, your depth. These are not weaknesses, but they become vulnerabilities when unguarded. Machiavellian wisdom does not ask you to abandon these qualities, but to protect them. Just as you would not leave gold unattended in a hostile environment, you should not expose your inner world to those who exploit it. Selective openness is not betrayal of your values, it is fidelity to them. At this stage, you might feel a tension building. Part of you wants clarity and self-protection, while another part fears becoming cold, distant, or not yourself. This inner conflict is precisely where toxic dynamics survive. They rely on your guilt. They rely on your fear of being perceived as harsh. Machiavelli challenges you to redefine virtue. Virtue is not endless tolerance. Virtue is alignment between your actions and reality. When reality shows you that someone thrives on chaos, the virtuous response is not endurance, but withdrawal of fuel. Silence, boundaries, and emotional economy are not acts of aggression. They are acts of self-respect. Yet there is still more beneath the surface. We have not yet explored the deeper paradoxes, the ego traps, and the illusions that keep people entangled in toxic games far longer than necessary. The most dangerous battlefield is not between you and them, but within you. And that is where the next part will take us. To truly beat toxic people at their own game, you must confront something far more unsettling than their behavior: the silent agreements you make inside yourself. Toxic dynamics do not survive on manipulation alone. They survive on unresolved inner conflicts. The paradox is uncomfortable but essential to face. You can recognize manipulation intellectually and still remain emotionally trapped. This is because the battlefield has shifted from the external interaction to your inner architecture. Machiavelli understood that the most effective control is not imposed, but invited. And often it is invited through fear, hope, and ego. One of the deepest traps is the ego's desire to be understood. You want your intentions to be seen, your pain to be acknowledged, your goodness to be recognized. Toxic people intuitively exploit this desire. They withhold validation, distort your words, or feign misunderstanding, knowing that you will lean forward to correct the image. Every attempt to clarify becomes another chain. This is not accidental. The need to be understood is one of the most powerful levers of control because it disguises itself as virtue. Machiavellian clarity demands that you ask a hard question: do you want resolution or do you want recognition? Toxic people weaponize the gap between the two. Another illusion is the belief that consistency will eventually reform them. You tell yourself that if you remain calm, patient, and principled long enough, they will mirror that behavior. This belief feels moral, even enlightened, but it ignores a brutal psychological reality. People do not change when your behavior inconveniences them. They change when the cost of staying the same becomes too high. Toxic individuals often interpret patience not as strength, but as permission. Machiavelli would say that mercy without consequence is not mercy, but negligence. When boundaries are absent, patterns solidify. There is also the savior illusion, subtle and dangerous. You may not consciously think of yourself as a rescuer, yet you feel responsible for de-escalating, explaining, or soothing. You carry the emotional load because someone has to. Toxic people sense this immediately. They shift chaos onto you and remain curiously calm while you scramble for stability. This creates a false moral hierarchy where you feel superior yet exhausted, and they feel entitled yet unaccountable. The savior illusion binds you through pride disguised as compassion. Machiavellian wisdom dismantles this by reminding you that responsibility without authority is a trap. If you cannot enforce change, you must withdraw investment. Modern culture reinforces another illusion, that cutting off or distancing yourself from toxic people is failure. You are told that strength means endurance, that maturity means tolerance, that walking away is avoidance. This narrative keeps countless people trapped in cycles of emotional erosion. Machiavelli saw withdrawal not as weakness, but as strategic repositioning. Retreat, when done consciously, is not surrender. It is refusal to fight on terrain chosen by the enemy. Toxic people thrive in prolonged engagement. Distance starves the game. There is a deeper psychological layer here that few address: identity fusion. Over time, toxic dynamics blur your sense of self. You begin to define yourself in reaction to them. You anticipate their moods, edit your words, rehearse conversations that never resolve. Your inner world becomes crowded with their presence. This is the true victory of toxicity, colonization of attention. Machiavelli would warn you that whoever controls your attention controls your energy, and whoever controls your energy shapes your destiny. Reclaiming yourself requires not confrontation, but detachment from mental occupation. Another paradox emerges when you begin to change. As you reduce emotional output, stop explaining, and enforce limits, toxic people may accuse you of becoming cold, manipulative, or Machiavellian. This accusation is revealing. They label clarity as cruelty because clarity removes their advantage. They prefer you confused, reactive, and guilty. When you stop feeding the dynamic, they may escalate emotionally, attempting to provoke the old version of you. This escalation is not regression on your part, it is extinction behavior. A system fights hardest when it senses collapse. You must also confront the discomfort of ambiguity. Toxic people thrive on forcing immediate emotional responses. Silence, pauses, and delayed reactions feel unnatural at first because you have been conditioned to respond quickly to tension. Yet ambiguity is power. When you do not immediately fill the space, you force the other person to reveal more than they intended. Machiavelli understood the power of letting others speak themselves into exposure. Silence is not emptiness, it is a mirror. At a deeper level, beating toxic people requires redefining victory. Victory is not them apologizing, understanding, or changing. That fantasy keeps you emotionally invested. Victory is freedom of mind. Victory is when their behavior no longer dictates your inner state, when their provocations land on neutrality instead of nerves, when you can observe without absorbing. This shift is subtle but radical. It moves you from reaction to authorship of your own psychological space. There is also a spiritual dimension, whether acknowledged or not. Toxic people often operate from inner fragmentation. They externalize chaos because they cannot sit with themselves. When you stop engaging, you force them to face their own emptiness. Some will retreat, others will seek new targets. This is not your concern. Machiavellian wisdom is not about fixing broken souls, but about not sacrificing yourself to them. Finally, you must release the need for moral symmetry. You may never be seen as right. You may be misunderstood. You may be painted as the villain in their narrative. This is the final test. Can you tolerate being misjudged without collapsing into self-doubt? Machiavelli would say that reputation matters, but not at the cost of self-erasure. Inner alignment is worth more than external approval. When you accept this, toxic games lose their grip. Now all of this knowledge remains abstract unless it is embodied. Understanding is not transformation. The real shift happens when theory becomes behavior, when insight becomes practice. In the next part, we will move from awareness to action, from philosophy to concrete techniques that allow you to apply this clarity in daily life without becoming bitter, cruel, or closed. Understanding toxic dynamics changes nothing unless your behavior changes in quiet, disciplined ways. The goal here is not domination, revenge, or emotional numbness, but sovereignty. You are learning how to move through interactions without bleeding energy or betraying yourself. The first practice is radical response control. This means training yourself to pause before reacting, especially when provoked. Toxic people rely on speed. They want immediate answers, immediate emotions, immediate explanations. When you slow the rhythm, you regain control. Count internally. Breathe once. Let the urge to respond crest and fall. You will notice something unsettling and empowering. Most provocations lose force when they are not immediately met. The second practice is emotional economy. Stop over-investing. This does not mean becoming cold, it means becoming precise. Ask yourself before engaging, what is the return on this emotional investment? Will explaining bring clarity, or will it feed confusion? Will empathy be received or exploited? Toxic people are inefficient recipients of care. Give them structure instead. Short answers, neutral tone, clear limits. You are not here to educate, heal, or persuade them. You are here to protect your inner stability. The third practice is boundary enforcement without justification. This is where many people fail. They set boundaries, then immediately apologize for them, explain them, or soften them. Every explanation becomes a negotiation. Every apology becomes leverage. Practice stating limits as facts, not arguments. I am not available for this conversation. This behavior does not work for me. I will leave if this continues. Then act accordingly. Boundaries without consequences are wishes. Consequences do not require anger. They require consistency. Another essential technique is selective transparency. Stop revealing your inner world to people who misuse it. Toxic individuals collect personal information not to understand you, but to weaponize it later. Be warm, but not porous. You can be polite without being intimate. You can be respectful without being revealing. Share less about your fears, plans, and doubts until someone proves they can hold that information with care. This is not secrecy born of fear, but discretion born of wisdom. You must also practice detachment from outcome. This is difficult because part of you wants resolution, justice, or closure. Toxic dynamics rarely offer that. The more you need a specific outcome, the more control you hand over. Practice entering interactions with a single intention: to remain aligned with yourself, not to win, not to convince, not to be liked. Alignment is the only metric that matters. When you leave an interaction feeling intact, you have succeeded, regardless of how the other person behaves. A powerful daily exercise is mental eviction. Toxic people often live rent-free in your thoughts long after interactions end. This drains energy invisibly. When you notice yourself replaying conversations, rehearsing arguments, or imagining future confrontations, interrupt the loop gently but firmly. Say internally, "This no longer serves me." Redirect attention to the present moment, your body, or a concrete task. Attention is a resource. Where you place it determines what grows. Another practical strategy is pattern recognition journaling. Instead of focusing on isolated incidents, write down recurring behaviors you observe. Patterns cut through confusion. Toxic people thrive on making each incident feel unique, contextual, or misunderstood. Patterns reveal intention without requiring accusation. This practice also grounds you in reality when gaslighting occurs. When doubt creeps in, you can return to facts rather than feelings. There will be obstacles. Guilt is the first. You may feel selfish, harsh, or unkind when you stop accommodating. Remember this: guilt often appears when you stop playing a role that benefited others at your expense. Guilt is not always a moral signal. Sometimes it is withdrawal pain. Let it pass without obeying it. Discomfort does not mean you are wrong. It means you are changing. Fear is another obstacle. You may fear escalation, rejection, or being alone. Toxic people often amplify these fears to keep you compliant. Ask yourself honestly, what is the cost of staying as you are? What is the cost of silence, self-betrayal, and emotional erosion? Fear shrinks when you confront it with clarity. You are more capable than the version of you that learned to survive by appeasing. Consistency is crucial. You do not need to enforce boundaries perfectly, but you must enforce them reliably. Toxic people test limits repeatedly, not because they forget, but because they hope you will collapse. Each time you hold the line calmly, you retrain the dynamic. Some will adjust, others will disappear. Both outcomes are information, not failure. Finally, cultivate an inner reference point. Toxic dynamics weaken you when you rely on external validation to feel real. Strength grows when your sense of worth is internally anchored. Spend time alone without distraction. Reflect. Build a relationship with your own silence. The more grounded you are internally, the less reactive you become externally. Toxic people cannot feed on what they cannot reach. This path does not turn you into something dark. It turns you into something clear. Clear people are difficult to manipulate, not because they are aggressive, but because they are no longer available for confusion. And that clarity, practiced daily, changes everything. You have seen that toxic people do not win because they are stronger, smarter, or more deserving, but because most people never realize they are in a psychological game. Machiavelli's insight cuts through illusion with uncomfortable precision. Power belongs to those who see clearly and act accordingly. You learned that reacting feeds manipulation, that over-explaining hands over leverage, and that endless patience without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. You saw that the real battlefield is not the argument, but your attention, your emotional energy, and your need to be understood. When those are reclaimed, the game collapses on its own. Beating toxic people at their own game does not require cruelty or domination. It requires lucidity, restraint, and the courage to tolerate being misunderstood. It requires redefining virtue, not as endless tolerance, but as alignment with reality. The moment you stop trying to fix, save, or convince, you step out of the trap. The moment you value inner stability over external approval, you become untouchable in ways few anticipate. Now ask yourself this final question and sit with it honestly. Who would you become if no one could manipulate your emotions anymore? If you found value in your clarity rather than in being liked? If this reflection stirred something in you, share your thoughts in the comments and continue exploring these ideas with us. Subscribe, like the video, and remember this above all else. The most radical form of power is not control over others, but mastery over yourself.